All right, this is the men's 100-meter backstroke at the 2025 Toronto Grand Prix. This is Heat 1. We have 4 swimmers here. We are looking at Carter Buck in 3, Andrew Herman in 4, Benjamin Loewen in 5, and Ben Winterborn in 6. Let's watch the race, guys, and then we'll go one by one through you. All right, there's the times. Not sure why it's so bright in the pool, but it seems a lot brighter than the rest of the meet has been. Let's start with you, Carter. Getting into the ready position, maybe a slightly larger angle on this inside of your knee. Ideally, we are sitting at around 90 degrees. Pretty hard in a backstroke start. Not impossible though. Because we want to be in a pure push position rather than something where the musculature in our legs is creating like a static balance, essentially, where your hamstrings are partially contracted, your quads are partially contracted, keeping you in this place. And then all through your extension from here, well, let's try and find go, from here to about here, your body's kind of fighting itself before finally we are allowed to truly push. So let's start closer to that pure push moment. Let's come back a hot second here though. I'm a little interested in this. So let's take a look at where your knees are and where your feet are. Looks like you're a little knock-kneed. I think we have a couple of options. Either one, let's get our feet a little closer together. Okay, it's important to make sure that we have a solid drivetrain. I mean, we're in the gym constantly, doing squats, whatever, anything like a clean. And we're not doing it with our knees knocked. Not doing it with our ankles wider than our knees are. We train, we practice those motions. We train and build our musculature in those motions. Do the thing your body's been training to do. Don't change it up on yourself, especially when it comes to competition, right? Don't train for one thing and do another. Train one thing and then do that thing. We can see how dramatic that is here. It's maybe this perspective is doing something funky here, but I think that that's pretty narrow in the knee and certainly wide enough at the feet. Great dive though. A little bit of a flop on the end there. I'd like to ideally see a bit more of an arch and a bit more of a rainbow. So yeah, we want a bit more of an arch. We want a bit more of an entry that's maybe looking like this over here, where we can see that this is slipping in. Ultimately, splash on a dive, whether it's a back start or from the block. Splash is implying that a high surface area is encountering the water, and high surface area encountering the water is drag. So, want to avoid that. The other element is that the dive and the underwater after the dive are some of the fastest that our bodies will be moving in any race, including backstroke. We don't want to have the brakes on, right? There's no caution to the wind when we are trying to be in a speed-based sport. Got to go fast, cut the brakes. So trying to continue. This initial arc is just awesome. You got such a good body position. What I want to see is your body follow this arch. I don't want to see your hips not at some point reach this point in your ribs and then subsequently this point on your shoulders, right? If I just had a perfect point, in fact, okay, tip of the mouse that you can see, yeah. We can see that your hips instead travel in a different direction, right? I'd like them to travel up and around and down rather than partially up and then over and down. Shooting for height, shooting for distance, and ultimately shooting to have a higher angle of attack. So you have, this angle of attack, the flat of the angle is going to be the surface of the water. The angle is determined by, this general body position here. What is that? That's just sub 45 degrees, maybe. If we could increase that angle, the way that you're attacking that, then presumably your hips will have had to follow a different trajectory up and down and into the water. Something to work on, something to consider, something to play with ultimately. Playing with it is key. Great underwater. That gentleman was in the way. Let's see this break out. Great stroke. Love that. This gentleman. Here we are. Nice stroke. Love that. You are powering. Maybe a little bouncy. A bit more core tension might help out with that. I hope I don't cut you off. There we go. Good. Hell yeah. To the wall. Very nicely done. I want to see that again. You see that little bit of a raise up that you did? I think it's on this stroke. You're going to see your shoulders, your chest come a little higher than we're used to seeing you. That's not a body position we've seen the entire 50. And I get it. You're doing something different, something you haven't done the entire 50. But, you have this great stroke. Why throw in this bastardized final stroke? Are you a little close to the wall? Hard to tell from this perspective, honestly. You're so far away from where I am. Like, I'm not even at the 25 meters. I'm just up on the catwalk. Depth perception gets lost pretty hard with the camera at that stage. Kind of looked like you were close, but to really know that, you'd have to have a side-on view, or at least a view that has a closer angle. But nonetheless, you got to the wall first. You drove off the wall really well. Maybe could have gone a little bit longer on that underwater. Loving the power. You're on a real race, though. A little bit of a maybe slow down there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm seeing things. Really powerful. Here's something we can certainly improve. Yep. Look at how close you are to the wall. And yet, the decision has been made to take a subsequent stroke. And look how collapsed your arm has to be to not break your wrist. If you had decided to, and I know it's a little counterintuitive to what a lot of people teach, but here's the thing, you're traveling at high velocity, and the most efficient body position to be in is streamline, even with a single arm. If you reached back and really dove for the wall, that arm is gonna break the water ahead of you, and you're gonna slide to the wall. a lot faster, then you would have touched by now. You would have beat this guy. I don't think you would have beat lane 5. You would have beat lane 6. I don't know what you placed in this heat. But you certainly would have beat them all, except I think there's his touch. I think there's his touch. Maybe you beat him. Maybe he didn't touch. I think that's a bad touch on his part. But you certainly gave those guys an opportunity. I actually want to see what the placement right now is. Good job. Good job beating that guy on the outside. By a lot. What the heck? What lane are you in? You're in lane 3. What happened to lane 2? Alright, bizarre. Not sure what happened there. Regardless, I hope you can appreciate that. You probably didn't want to take those 2 strokes in that space. Let's get this time. Let's not get that time. I'm shooting at 24 or 30 frames per second. I think you would have touched probably around there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that the 10th frame that you're touching, or is that 11th frame where you're touching? Well, 24 frames or 30 frames per second, you know, that's not quite a handful of hundredths of a second per frame. So we're talking about maybe 1/3 of a second, maybe 0.4. I'd love to see you drop 1/3 of a second off of this time. I hope you'd also love to drop 1/3 of a second off of that time. All right, and that's free. You wouldn't have to swim it any different than that. So great swim, dude. But you know, some couple of things that we can definitely work on. All right, coming back to Andrew now in lane 4. Let's check it out. I like the body position. Great. We're looking like we've loaded up those legs very nicely. Extension, power, up. Love it. Look at the arc. But a little bit of a flop. And those feet dragged a little bit longer than I'd like. I'd like to ideally just drive off of this line and actually go up rather than have so much. I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive. I'd rather have a little bit more up than out, just because look at these anchors dragging you. Got this arch and a little bit of a splat, but your feet make a pretty good recovery into that, so it's not as bad as it could be, but and it looks a lot better fast. Looks a lot better fast, but I'm not here to be, you know, not showing you slow motion, and in slow motion it can reveal a lot of things. So I think that there's definitely maybe some little tiny stuff that we could work on with that, you know, driving up so that we can skip over this water completely, so that this arch, and critically your ability to do that little maneuver, right? A lot of people can't do that or don't understand how to do that, but that little maneuver where that you're able to slip in, if you can get some extra height, get some extra distance, and then do that anyways, that's gonna be a nice elevation, next step for you. Maybe a bit more of an amplitude on your kick would be nice to see. Good underwater, great breakout. Maybe a little bit of a slow stroke, great, but you know, I mean, to each their own. Essentially, you know, what works for you, but maybe a bit more energy. Driving for the wall. Okay, so potentially the start's perspective was hiding how good your kick is, because that's a good kick. But like, let's see that kick at the front. Let's see that kick on the first go, because that was a pretty awesome kick. Slow stroke. Slow stroke. This is objectively slow. You've got power and you've got hold, but maybe the opportunity to just really give her so that you can establish yourself. And I like that finish. Nicely done on the finish, at least. Good reach. But like, let's come back. I think you need to think about making a move. Like, take these first 3 strokes right away, and I I'm a subscriber to a philosophy where it's, you know, the first 3 strokes of every length is an opportunity to establish yourself. Make those 3 strokes the best strokes of the entire length. Because if they're 3 bad strokes, then you are fighting an uphill battle to then establish a good stroke. But if you establish 3 perfect strokes, then you either get to run across a very nice high plateau, or you get to go on a downhill battle, which is much easier, right? You don't want to fall off a cliff or anything, but fighting a downhill battle is much easier than fighting uphill. But we can see that you're just a little bit too concerned with having a big power stroke when you need to have a bit more of an energetic stroke, I think. It is constantly a fight between how high can the stroke rate be and how high can the hold be, and finding a medium between those two things that works for you in a race. I really like that first 50, and you've clearly got the chops for it. It's just about the execution, man. Nice swim. We are going to come over to Benjamin. Lane 5. This angle could be a little bit larger. We want to set ourselves up so that we're doing a full push motion. That push motion takes over at 90 degrees and greater in the leg extension. So we have an acute angle right now. We want to go from a right angle to an obtuse angle. Looking pretty good, man. I really like that. That is looking pretty darn fine. Nicely done. Love that. Maybe a little bit slow on the stroke off the start there. It almost looks like you're building stroke rate up a little bit. Like kind of like on ton 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 ton. It's pretty consistent, I'd guess. Maybe a little bit bouncy. Maybe that's just kind of the perspective. Nicely to the wall. Good underwater. Great amplitude by the looks of it. Great breakout, great underwater. That's where you just got really ahead on that. This is looking powerful. This is looking pretty dominant. There's definitely, you see that little bit of a, it's just a bit of a bounce. You can see your head rocking. Great touch, great finish. Nice. The head bouncing thing, maybe a little bit of core tension added to the swim will help with that. Play with that before you ever try to experiment in a competition. Play with that at speed. The bounciness is hard to tell the practical outcomes and the practical effect of that, but theoretically a more stable system is better. So just on that alone, I'd say it warrants a little bit of play on your part, a little bit of experimentation, but really great swim, very dominant. All right, we're coming over to Ben in lane 6. Nice angle. I like the legs in that position. I think the reality is with backstroke, we can have a slightly smaller than 90-degree angle. We don't want to be wasting too much energy holding ourselves out in space. Hard to tell when the go is here. Okay, so this is kind of a critical thing here. Check out how you don't stop moving. You never stop moving. There's no stability. Let's look at lane 5. Let's look at Ben for a second. Ben comes up. Take your marks. Frame by frame. Ben is not moving. His head stationary. You come up. You are rocking back because you are in such a high and a stressful position. And albeit, go seems to happen pretty fast in this race. But I want you to find a point of stability, because the last thing I want to do, there are two kind of outcomes, right? One, either somebody hits you for being unstable on the start, or two, swimmers take your marks, step down, and you do a full release because you're waiting for any kind of noise. Find that stability. Similar comment to a couple of the other gentlemen. Not as bad, but the legs dragging, the feet dragging. I'd like to see a bit more of an exit from the water. Check out Ben's feet. He's instantly out of the water. If there was a child sitting here, they'd have no fear of him hitting them. You'd have kicked the child. Don't kick the child. But very smooth entry. Very smooth entry. Maybe the smoothest entry in the bunch. So maybe trying to get a little bit more height, maybe a bit more explosivity immediately off of the wall, because you clearly know what to do when it comes to entering the water. Just slipped into the water. Great looking kick by the looks of it. Great breakout. A little bit of an asymmetric backstroke. We can see that your left arm is taking a little longer on the recovery than your right arm is. It's a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Maybe not the recovery, but I meant more like the pull maybe. I like it. You might have been first to the wall there. Which begs the question, where did Ben beat you? Well, I'd say the breakout is somewhere where you lose some space. But he's also got, look at the cadence between the two of you here. He's taken 5 strokes for every 3 that you're taking, maybe, something like that. So maybe just a little bit more energy, like the dive back. It's hard to recommend specific strategies and tactics, especially when it's coming from somebody that, I'm not a backstroker, so, if we're talking 50 freestyle or 50 butterfly or even short course 50 breaststroke, I can talk from experience about strategies and tactics, but in general, I think you need to make a move right here. Making a move usually takes a handful, maybe up to 10 meters to bear fruit. But if you made a move there, then right here is where, if you were able to increase effort and speed and get your velocity up, you'd be traveling into the finish faster. Great swim though. Jeez. You're in lane 6, he's in lane 3. Yeah, good finish, man. Great swims all around, guys.